Think about this. Back in 1991, one of the world's two superpowers, the Soviet Union, just disappeared. It wasn't defeated in a war, it just dissolved from the inside out. It was a moment that completely redrew the map and shocked the entire world. But what if this wasn't some random historical accident? What if it was actually the result of a predictable, almost mathematical, systemic failure?
So that's the big question, right? How does a massive, powerful state, a global superpower, seem to fall apart almost overnight? To get to the bottom of this, we're going to use this really unique analytical framework that breaks down the stability of a country into 5 key parts.
Okay, so let's get into this. Picture a kind of formula for a country's overall health. It's built on 5 core components. Now, for a system to be perfectly stable and healthy, each of those 5 parts should score a 1.0, adding up to a perfect total of 5.0. But here's the catch. If a component scores too low or even too high, it throws everything out of balance. If that total score drops way below 5.0, well, that's a huge red flag that the system is in deep, deep trouble. This is the exact lens we're going to use to figure out what happened to the USSR.
So what are these 5 critical pieces of the puzzle? And, more importantly, where did the Soviet Union get it so wrong? We're about to break down this formula, variable by variable, to see exactly how this fatal imbalance grew until the entire thing just couldn't hold itself together anymore. All right, first up, we've got V for volume. Now, this is exactly what it sounds like. The sheer scale of the state, its massive territory, its huge population, and all the complexity that comes with managing it. And you know, on paper, the Soviet Union's immense size looked like its greatest strength. But check this out. Its score was 1.5. And like we just said, in this formula, going over 1.0 isn't a good thing at all. It's a sign of a dangerous imbalance. The system was literally too big to succeed.
So why was being too big such a fatal flaw? Well, the USSR was a true hypercolossus, a massive collection of 15 different republics and almost 300 million people. That huge scale actually became a massive weakness. The central government in Moscow was just completely out of touch. It couldn't effectively manage or even understand what was happening in its vast, diverse regions. And that disconnect, it fueled this massive fragmentation, leading to what historians call a parade of sovereignties, as republic after republic started to break away.
Okay, let's move on to our next clue in this mystery. R for resources. The Soviet Union was world famous for its natural wealth. We're talking endless oil, gas, metals, you name it. It was seen as this land of almost limitless potential.
So you'd think, with all that wealth, the score would be pretty good, right? But no, it was just 1.0. I mean, what gives? They had the resources, so what on earth was the problem?
And this is where we hit a huge paradox. The country was, on paper, incredibly rich. But because of years of isolation and falling behind technologically, just getting those resources out of the ground was ridiculously inefficient. And to make matters worse, their whole centrally planned economy was just broken. It was incapable of turning all that natural wealth into actual prosperity for its people. Instead, you got shortages and famously empty store shelves. The resources were there, but they were fueling poverty, not progress.
All right, our third variable is T for time. Now, this isn't just about seconds and minutes. Think of it more like the nation's rhythm, its momentum, its place in the world and the flow of history. Was it keeping up, or was it falling behind?
And the score here? Wow, it's just devastating. Only 0.5. This tells us the system had fallen catastrophically behind the times. It was completely out of sync with the rest of the developing world.
I mean, think about it. After all those huge triumphs in the 20th century, we're talking rapid industrialization, winning World War II, putting the first man in space, then came the 1980s, and everything just ground to a halt. It was total stagnation. Then came these sudden, jarring reforms like perestroika, which, instead of fixing things, just completely destroyed the system's already weak rhythm. While the rest of the world was charging into the digital age, the Soviet Union was stuck in an analog past.
Okay, this brings us to Q for quality. And this is maybe the one we can all relate to the most. What was life actually like for the average person living in this so-called superpower?
And once again, we see a really dismal score of 0.5. This just screams that there was a massive gap between the government's grand ambitions and what people were actually experiencing day to day. The truth is, the quality of everyday life just didn't line up with the country's superpower status. Not even close. Consumer goods were famously terrible compared to the West. The infrastructure was literally crumbling. All those amazing achievements in the military and the space race, they never really trickled down to the kitchen and the school. For the average person, there was no progress.
And that brings us to the final and maybe the most crucial piece of the puzzle. M for meaning. This is the ideological glue, right? The shared belief, the common purpose, the big idea that's supposed to hold everything and everyone together.
And the score here is just a flat 0. A complete and total collapse of belief. Honestly, this is the real smoking gun.
Yeah, by 1991, that grand communist ideology was totally bankrupt. Nobody believed in the promise of a bright future anymore. The elites were just looking out for themselves, and the general population was simply trying to survive. And when the government's new policy of glasnost or openness suddenly exposed all the failures and contradictions of the system, it didn't fix anything. It just created a giant ideological vacuum. And when people stop believing, there's no energy left to fight a crisis.
Okay, so let's recap. We've looked at all 5 parts of the formula. The system was too big, its resources were useless, it was stuck in the past, life was low quality, and worst of all, nobody believed in it anymore. Now it's time to do the final math and see what it all adds up to.
So let's just run the numbers, shall we? Volume was way oversized at 1.5. Resources were just holding on at 1.0. Time and quality were both failing with a score of 0.5, and meaning, a complete 0. You add all that up and you get a final score of just 3.5.
And when you look at it on a chart like this, the gap is just stark. It's crystal clear. A stable system needs a 5.0. The Soviet Union was sputtering along at 3.5. That's a critical deficit of 1.5. No system, not even a superpower armed to the teeth, can survive that kind of internal failure. The system was fundamentally broken. The glue holding it all together had completely dissolved.
So, the fall of the Soviet Union wasn't just some dusty old historical event. It's a powerful case study in how complex systems can just unravel. So what's the big lesson here? What can we learn from the anatomy of this kind of collapse?
And this really breaks it down for us, doesn't it? When you have huge volume but no control, you get overload. When you have resources but no efficiency, you get an empty shell. When you have time but no renewal, you get stagnation. Quality without progress leads to deep disappointment. And the knockout blow, meaning without belief, creates a total emptiness at the core of a society. You see, when just one of these things goes wrong, a system gets into trouble. But when they all start collapsing at once, well, failure is pretty much inevitable.
And that leaves us with one final, pretty big thought. This formula isn't just a history lesson. It's a tool we can use to look at the world right now. So, as you look around at the world today, at countries, big companies, maybe even other institutions, where do you see the signs of a similar imbalance? It's a powerful question and definitely something to think about.